Good day, this is Len Lazarick with MarylandReporter.com, and we're here today to discuss one of the most contentious issues of this General Assembly session, and we're happy to have with us Delegate Heather Mizeur of Montgomery County and Delegate Cathy Vitale. They're going to be discussing the proposal for granting full marriage rights to same-sex couples. And why do you support this, and why is it such a personal issue for you, Heather?
Thank you, Len. Cathy, nice to be with you.
Good to see you.
We, in Maryland, when you get a marriage license, there are 425 rights that come along with that marriage license that the state gives to protect families. Marriage is an agreement between two people to come together to share joys and divide up responsibilities and to help shoulder each other's pain. And where that marriage license comes into play is on the shouldering the pain part. Those rights and responsibilities, those protections that the state grants through that license helps families in the toughest of times. It helps us with medical decision making, end-of-life decisions, helps a couple with the right to travel in an ambulance together, to claim a body for burial, for inheritance protections upon death. These are the things that protect families when they need that protection most, and every child deserves to be in a family that is protected. Some families get those rights right now, and we want to make sure that every family in Maryland, from Ocean City to Oakland, benefits the same.
And Cathy, you oppose this this bill. Why?
I do oppose the same-sex marriage bill. I think that many of the benefits that the delegate just talked about are benefits that are already either conferred through legislation, statute. I have the right to make a decision as to who I would like in an operating room, who I want to make last right decisions for me, and that's granted legislatively by statute. From my perspective, I separate the two. I see marriage as a religious sacrament. We have many couples in the United States that enjoy all the benefits that Heather just talked about, the loving, close relationship, that family unit, that have chosen not to get married. And I don't think that they're any less a couple, whether they're same-sex or heterosexual. They make they've made a decision not to get married, to not move forward, and those protections are the same. I don't think that we need to extend or to go into what really is God's definition of marriage and have that changed.
So you've already brought religion into this, and one of the reasons you two are here, as a matter of fact, at my invitation, is that you're both practicing Catholics, and the Catholic Church has taken a very strong position about this. How do you feel about that?
I understand the church's struggle with this. As a young child who was both very spiritual and also aware of my sexual orientation, I struggled myself on how to reconcile the two, because I was often getting messages from church leaders that that was something that wasn't supposed to be. And upon reflection over many, many years, realized by the time I was in college that every time I was listening to a voice that told me that it was wrong, it was a voice coming outside of myself. It wasn't the voice inside of me. And that my discernment process with God directly reconciled it by saying, you're a child of God. You're made in my image. We aren't to judge each other. We're supposed to love each other. And I am a Catholic for many, many reasons, not the least of which is the Church's social justice teachings, to fight to house the homeless and feed the hungry and provide health care to people. That's really the core mission of the Church. And if we really go into the ideology of our faith, our Church teaches about the primacy of our own conscience. Our catechism very much stresses that regardless of what the overall dogmatic teachings of the Church are, Nothing can come between your own discernment between you and God. And having gone through that process myself, I sit very comfortably on the side that my relationship deserves protection and recognition by the state. I'm not trying to get the church to change its mind. I'm not suggesting in this legislation that the church change its teachings. On the other side of the church house door, they can decide who to marry and who not to marry. The church does it right now with straight people, right? If you are divorced without an annulment, the church can tell you that you can't get married. Nothing about that is going to change. The church can still teach that it's wrong if it wants to teach that it's wrong. But what we have to change is that tax-paying citizens of the state shouldn't be treated differently under the law, and that when the state issues a license that grants protections to families, that every family in the state deserves that protection.
The proponents of this law, including the governor, say that this bill, as opposed to the one that didn't pass last year, has more protections for religious institutions. Do you think that's true?
No, I don't. I have Senate Bill 241 and took a look at it again today in my conversations and discussions with the Catholic Church this morning, to understand their concerns about what has been postured as the protection. And under the terms of the bill, it would suggest, as you have said, that an organization, and to use their exact language, may not be required to provide services, and it lists a variety of different services, if the request for the services, the accommodations, the advantages, is related to solemnization of marriage or the celebration of a marriage, the promotion of marriage through any social or religious program, or services in violation of their religious beliefs. If there was a period there, the discussion would be different. But it's not. It goes on to say, unless state or federal funds are received for that specific program or service. So it creates three problems, and you can look to Illinois and you look to New York to find out that the other functions of the church, the Catholic high school, for example, that receives state funding for textbooks, ends up being an organization that has state or federal funds that are received for their programs and their services, which are a very specific educational teaching. And it includes the Ten Commandments, it includes traditional marriage. It doesn't afford, as we saw in New Jersey, in Ocean Grove, even that language through the courts. You know, as legislators, we make the laws and we have judges then decide whether they like the provisions. And there's probably one of the best examples of language similar, Christian organization denied the opportunity.
You've heard some of these objections. How do you deal with that argument, since I presume you were involved in helping to craft this, correct?
I saw the language before it was introduced.
Okay.
And the language we had last year, we felt provided a very strong religious exemption. And when you have a religious exemption, you have a religious exemption. But we went forward and broadened the language to include language that's been successfully used in states like New York and DC and Maine, to give further comfort to those that might have any concerns related to religious exemption language. If there are additional edits and changes to the language that are needed to make people feel comfortable that there is an absolute separation between the state's offering of these protections and benefits to families and what the churches are still allowed to do and teach, so be it. But it's somewhat disingenuous from the Catholic Conference's perspective to raise so much concern about this when there has been no similar standing related to concerns. Opposite sex couples have done a good job of messing up marriage within the church as well, and creating conflicts for the sacrament. And you know, the church is at its best when it is consistent, and when it also recognizes that the church are the people in the pews, and we have an opportunity outside of the church to have recognition of this, of our relationships, and protect us. And inside the pews, the church still gets to teach what it wants, but there is, I think, split opinion even inside the church among Maryland Catholics.
This is still going to be a close vote in the House of Delegates,
Absolutely.
correct? And everybody pretty much concedes that it's going to go to referendum. Do you think it's going to go to referendum, or it'll be if it passes? The governor has promised to sign it.
Sure.
The governor, who also describes himself as a Catholic.
I think that there will be an attempt made, and it wouldn't surprise me if it went to referendum. Anything that tends to be incredibly contentious in Maryland's past has whipped up enough interest to get enough signatures to put it on the ballot, and we're prepared to take the momentum from winning in the General Assembly to running the kind of grassroots advocacy effort throughout the state to turn out the vote to make sure that we win at the ballot box in November as well.
You know, Len, the way to address that would be to put it to the people on the front end. In other words, address it as a constitutional amendment and allow that issue to go to referendum. As recently as this constitutional
amendment that says marriage is
between a man and a woman.
One man,
one woman. And I think it is important, as we've heard a lot of rhetoric, the distinction is one man, one woman, and some of the other conversations and what I consider disingenuous conversations about multiple partners and things, I think doesn't belong in the conversation. But I also know that 31 states have taken it to referendum. I know that 63 million people have taken a position in the voting booth on this. 63% of the American population has said they support traditional marriage, and the most recent polls, even here in the state of Maryland, still say that traditional marriage is the preferred definition here in the state of Maryland, and that would be the Gonzales polls that I was citing.
We've barely scratched the surface on some of these issues. There's going to be a big Marriage Alliance rally. There's going to be a bill hearing next week. There's going to be I presume, rallies from your side as well. The Marriage Alliance is the one man, one woman.
And Marylanders for Marriage Equality are doing the same.
Right, and so I think we're going to be talking about this for a couple of weeks. You think?
I think you're right.
Yeah,
if not throughout the month of February.
I think there are people who would object to that, don't you think?
We have so many issues that we're addressing in the General Assembly, so many economic issues that I think they'll occupy the rest of our time through the General Assembly as well.
But
thankfully, we're really good at multitasking.
That's
we can
correct.
Take on a lot of issues
on that we agree.
in a 90-day session.
But I think most people would agree also that this is an important issue.
It is an important
Very
issue.
important issue, and an important issue that deserves to be reconciled, I think, in the General Assembly. It's always unfortunate when we try to put people's civil rights on a ballot measure and leave it to that kind of a vote. We might end up there, but I don't think it's a place we should start.
And that's one of the disagreements, certainly, is that it's not a civil right issue, at least from the way that I look at it. And I think that's the debate that we're going to see on the House floor.
I think that there are two ways that we can make this argument equal. We can either make our relationships equal by giving us rights, or we can make them equal by taking away yours. And I think if the table were turned and the proposal was to take away the protections that you have in your marriage, it would probably feel differently. And that's the kind of discussion that we're trying to have here on why it is a civil protection issue.
We could keep going on this for some time, but we're not, and we're going to wrap up, and this is a very contentious issue. Thank you, Delegate Heather Mizeur and Delegate Cathy Vitale, for being with us today. And this is Len Lazarick for MarylandReporter.com.